Welcome to the Critical Patriot. Today I'm delighted to have an eminent expert on South Asia, Professor Christine Fair. She did her BS, Masters, and PhD at Chicago University and currently teaching at an American university. And at the moment, you are, ma'am, in North Virginia.
That's correct.
First of all, ma'am, how do you rate Pakistan's performance in the recent agreement or memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran? So, is that a short-lived glory, or has Pakistan really gained something of great significance and consequence?
So I was very critical of Pakistan as a potential partner, given its relationships with Saudi Arabia in particular. I think given that during the first negotiations, Pakistan sent a consignment of combat aircraft to Saudi Arabia, even as the negotiations were ongoing. So I was actually pretty critical of Pakistan being able to do this, given that I didn't see it as a disinterested party. But I think Pakistan performed as well as one could hope. I think everyone understands that the real spoiler here is Israel, and what happens to this deal is going to really rise or fall upon the decision making of Israel, and that isn't something that Pakistan can control.
So, is Pakistan in both camps? Is it an American camp, or is it in China's camp?
So I think Pakistan has always been in both camps, going back to the 1950s, when Pakistan was an ally of the United States through SEATO and CENTO, and also we had a mutual defense pact going back to the mid 50s, even as Pakistan was beginning to negotiate under Ayub Khan its relationships with China. And sometimes, like for example, during the 1980s, the U.S. and China were on the same page with respect to Pakistan. So I would say Pakistan, going back to the mid 50s, has always been both in a China camp as well as in a United States camp. And what I find very interesting is that neither the United States or China has ever said to Pakistan, choose a side and stick with it. Both the United States and China understand the relationship that each side has with Pakistan and what relationship Pakistan has with the other.
Let me shift gears a bit, ma'am. I would like to pick your brains on India-Pakistan relations. Are these two countries doomed to live as mortal enemies, or is there any light at the end of the tunnel? And who can play a role in bringing about a rapprochement between these two countries?
So as I wrote about pretty extensively in my book, Fighting to the End, I think the Pakistan army is existentially poised to sabotage any significant peace possibility with India. As Chris Clary notes in his own book, The Difficult Politics of Peace, there have been windows of exceptionality to that claim. But for the broad expanse over Pakistan's history, the army has been a spoiler. And the reason why the army has been a spoiler is if there were to be truly peace with India, the Pakistan army wouldn't be able to justify its large conventional footprint. It also wouldn't be able to justify its inordinate control over the Pakistani budget. And it also wouldn't be able to justify running and ruining the country both directly and indirectly. So I think the prospects are not great for any kind of India-Pakistan rapprochement, principally because of the equities of the Pakistan army. I'm also not entirely sure if this current Modi government is terribly inclined towards peace either, for reasons of its own ideological compunction.
Ma'am, I hope you are familiar with the fact that in 2021, General Bajwa negotiated a peace with the Indian government. And according to Pakistani journalists, Hamid Mir in particular, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was supposed to come to Pakistan on the 9th of April. And he was supposed to go to a temple in Balochistan, and then he would come to Islamabad, and he would announce the resumption of trade and sports relations. And Kashmir was to be frozen for 20 years. But Shah Mahmood Qureshi, who was the foreign minister of Imran Khan, he prevailed on him and he sabotaged the agreement. was it not a golden opportunity for Pakistan to improve its economy and to improve the lot of its population?
So I'm very suspicious, actually, about the institutional buy-in of that deal. I'm aware of it. Unless you actually had the buy-in of your corps commanders, the deal isn't really worth the parchment that it was written on. I mean, you'll remember back in 2004, Musharraf also made very significant peace overtures, but his corps commanders opposed it. And the first thing that Kiani did upon Musharraf's ouster was to resume the conflict with India. So as I said, there have been really important windows of opportunity, but for whatever reason, they slam shut. But I've been generally pretty skeptical of the institutional buy-in behind those windows.
Pakistan has about 250 universities and about 35 prominent think tanks. So, how many academic experts Pakistan has on India? Because Pakistan describes India as an existential threat. So that should mean that Pakistan takes this threat seriously and studies this threat seriously in an academic manner. So, how many experts do you think Pakistan has on India?
By my criteria, I would have to say zero. There are important writers who tend to come from the armed services. Obviously, a really important writer, I'm not going to call him a scholar, was Lieutenant General Javed Hassan. He was the former commandant of Pakistan's then National Defense College. Of course, it's now a National Defense University. But he wrote a very well-known book which studied, or which purported to study, India's, if you will, strategic mindset. The book was called India, A Study in Profile. It was a very problematic book. It talked about India in terms of civilizational, in terms of its civilizational mindset, a very problematic discussion of its strategic culture and its military thinking. India's regional ambitions, its discussion of India's regional ambitions wasn't so terrible. But what makes this terrible book so important is that it's considered required reading at Pakistan's National Defense University. General Asad Durrani, he has done a number of books along with Dolit on the sort of spy-to-spy relationships with India. But in terms of like what I would call an academic scholar at a university, I can't think of a single one.
Mm-hmm. And does it apply to the Kashmir issue as well? For example, if a foreigner comes to Islamabad and he asks a Pakistani scholar, can you recommend a book that explains Pakistan's position on Kashmir? So, do you think there is a book that the scholar can recommend to this foreigner?
So what I think is fascinating, because I teach this subject at Georgetown, and I'm all the time looking for a good book from Pakistan's point of view on Kashmir. What I actually find is that many Western scholars of the Kashmir dispute do a perfectly fine job of pointing out Pakistan's point of view. For even though the history of the region is available for all to read, I particularly find anthropologists to purport views on Kashmir that are highly sympathetic to Pakistan's point of view. So, but I also, despite the importance of Kashmir to Pakistan, there's not a single Pakistani scholar. Now, there are Pakistani diasporans. That's a different issue. There are many Pakistani diasporans writing in the UK and in the US about Kashmir. But in terms of scholars at Pakistan itself, within Pakistan itself, I come up with a lot of challenges finding a so-called Kashmir expert.
So when was the last time you visited Pakistan and India? Are you in touch with Pakistani scholars and Indian scholars?
Let's answer your first question. So the Pakistanis won't let me back. I haven't been back since 2013. Just about a month and a half or so ago, I wrote the defense attaché in the Pakistani embassy because I would like to go back, but he never responded to my email. So I take that I'm not going to bother applying for a visa. India, I go to India all the time. So, but most people probably don't know is that I do literary translation from Indian languages. So every summer for the past several years, I would be in Chandigarh translating Punjabi literature. This summer, I just came back from India. I went to Agartala in Tripura, and I went to Kohima in Nagaland, both for historical reasons. And then, of course, I did some tourism. The whole thing was a tourism trip, to be blunt. But I go to India once or twice a year, and this is the first year in many, many years that I didn't spend my summers in India.
And let me pick your brains on Pahalgam and subsequent events. So what is your take on these events?
What do you mean? You have a more specific question?
Yeah, I mean, in Pakistan, the national narrative seems to have become that Pahalgam was a false flag operation.
Well, that's just absurd. I mean, that's just absurd.
How does the international community take this claim?
I don't think the international community gives much credence to Pakistani claims like that because they're so preposterous. I certainly don't. I don't know anyone who does.
And you have written a book on Lashkar-e-Taiba.
I've written two, actually.
Okay. So, did you meet Hafiz Saeed or his brothers? You know, two of his brothers, they lived in the US. One lived for, I think, 21 years. The other lived in the US for 7 years. And one of them, at least, had very good relations with the local rabbi. He was in Boston, you know.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's really funny. No, so my request to meet Hafiz Saeed went rebuffed. He notoriously doesn't meet women. He did meet an Italian journalist named Francesca Marino, but to my knowledge, she's the only woman that's met him. Of course, I've met Yahya Mujahid, but I have a very different take on meeting these people. In my limited experience actually meeting them, they don't tell you the truth. They just outright lie. And this was true of the Pakistani military personnel that I met as well. They don't tell you the truth. And they don't remember. So in my work, whether it was Fighting to the End or the two books on Lashkar-e-Taiba, I rely overwhelmingly on published materials. I rely on texts because the texts are what they are. And unlike human beings, they don't not remember, and they don't lie. This doesn't mean that the texts are truthful. That's a different issue. Like many of LET's publications that I used in the writing of my books are propaganda materials, but they are what they are, and you analyze them for what they are. So I actually don't rely extensively in my work on interviews with people. And then that's philosophically why.
Are you familiar with Arif Jamal's work? He used to be a colleague of mine. He used to be a colleague of mine in Islamabad, and he is based in the US now.
Yes.
He has written extensively on these organizations.
No, he wrote a great book called Ghost Wars, and that was a terrific book. Unfortunately, his subsequent book on Lashkar-e-Taiba, he was really trying to make money off of it. It's not a great book. It was priced at $300, a price point that no one was going to purchase. And he's an example. I mean, he didn't write that book when he was in Pakistan. Obviously, he couldn't have written that book when he was in Pakistan. It's when you're in diaspora that you get to write a book like that. But unfortunately, Arif has had a lot of difficulties making it. I'm not sure what he's doing. I've heard different stories about what he's doing now, but he's no longer working as a scholar.
Yeah, that's what I heard. There are quite a few think tankers and scholars specializing in South Asia in the US. I think most of them are based in Washington, D.C. How many do you think there are? About 50?
50? Oh,
yeah.
No, far fewer in Washington, D.C. So let's just go to the think tanks. So at Stimson, who study South Asia,
Hmm.
maybe you have three or four at Stimson.
Okay.
At the Middle East Institute, you have Marvin Weinbaum, who basically ventriloquates for the Pakistani state. Marvin hasn't written anything sensible on Pakistan in countless years. Then you have at Stimson, or not at Stimson, excuse me, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. You have Milan Vaishnav. You did have Ashley Tellis, and they were advertising for Ashley's replacement. I don't know who they hired ultimately to replace Ashley. Then, of course, Stimson does have
Michael Michael Kugelman.
No, they didn't hire Michael Kugelman at Stimson.
Hmm.
No, Michael Kugelman is at the Atlantic Council,
Okay.
right? He's at the Atlantic Council now, and of course, Michael Kugelman is at the Atlantic Council because Doge shut down the Wilson Center. So you're really looking at about, and then at Brookings, of course, you have Tanvi Mudden.
And there is also Daniel Markey.
I've already covered him. He's at
Uh-huh.
Stimson. He's at Stimson.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I don't know. I don't know who's, as I said, who they've hired at Carnegie. So in the DC area, at least in think tanks, you have about 10, and that's not and that's covering India and Pakistan. So that's not a large number at all.
How about Shuja Nawaz, Hussain Haqqani, and Hassan Abbas?
So Hassan Abbas is not at a think tank. Hassan Abbas
Uh-huh.
is at the National Defense University.
Mhm.
Hussain Haqqani has taken, and I did forget Aparna Pandey
Mhm.
at Hudson. Hussain has taken a leave of absence from, I think he's still at Hudson, but he's actually based in Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
Shuja Nawaz does not have a standing position. I think he might be an adjunct fellow also at the Atlantic Council, but you're even if you include those people, you're still not looking at between 10 and 15. You're not looking at more than 15. So this is hardly a large number for such an important region.
And the US has the highest number of think tanks, 1,872. And China has 512, UK has 444, India has 293. So, what is the quality of Indian think tanks?
I mean, I've never really spent a lot of time with Indian think tanks. I've spent, some time at CLAWS. I spent some time at IDSA. I think there's a lot of, and similarly, the think tanks at Pakistan, like the Institute for Strategic Studies, there's a lot of pressure to basically produce things that the government wants to hear, not things that the government needs to hear. I spent a lot of time at the RAND Corporation, about 10 years in total. I think RAND lost Derek Grossman, which I don't think was a terrible loss. I think he's better served in academia than he was at the RAND Corporation. And there's another guy at RAND, Isfandiar. I'm actually blanking out his name, Exunder something or other. So RAND also has a South Asianist or two. But what I will say about my time spent at the RAND Corporation is that the RAND Corporation did tell clients what they needed to hear, not just what they wanted to hear. And I haven't really seen that intellectual independence in Indian or Pakistani think tanks based upon my limited experience, which I think is an important caveat.
Okay. And by the way, is Bruce Riddle active these days or has he retired?
So he was at Brookings. I haven't seen him write anything in a while. So I don't know what Bruce's status is.
Coming back to India-Pakistan relations, do you think any foreign power, the US, the UK, or Saudi Arabia, can play a role in bringing India and Pakistan to some kind of understanding, at least normal relations, if not good relations?
So, I mean, ultimately, for there to be normal relations, you need to have a Pakistan that is committed to non-interference. And in response to that non-interference, you need to have an Indian government that's committed to diminishing the counterinsurgency grid. And in my analysis, based upon the Pakistani state, particularly the Pakistan Army's position as a spoiler, I don't see any prospects for that. And I don't see any prospects. And let's take a look at China. China doesn't have any interest in playing this role of peacemaker. China is perfectly happy having Pakistan play an agent provocateur, so that India always has to worry about Pakistan in some measure. So I don't see a lot of the U.S. is not going to play that role. I think Trump has floated that role. The Indians have basically, shut that down. Trump, there's a reason why many presidents have not shown an interest in mediating Kashmir, because it's not possible. So I don't feel like there's a lot of prospects coming from the Pakistani side for true normalization, even though it would greatly behoove the Pakistani economy to have normalization. The Pakistan Army is perfectly happy with the status quo. So not only I don't see any scope for Pakistan's commitment to a peaceful status quo, and I certainly don't see scope for international actors trying to persuade, cajole, or otherwise pressure Pakistan to accept a peaceful status quo.
But is this situation sustainable over the long term?
Because it's been sustainable. It's been sustainable.
It is getting from bad to worse. 27 million Pakistani children are out of school, and 40% of Pakistani children are facing stunted growth, and 30% of Pakistanis, their monthly income is less than 8,500 per person.
I don't disagree with you, but I don't think the Pakistan Army cares.
Mm-hmm.
And until the Pakistan Army cares, none of this is going to change.
Any concluding thoughts?
This topic never elicits optimism in me. It never elicits solutions. It simply doesn't.
If I may say one final word, many Indians would point out that Prime Minister Modi was interested in having peace with Pakistan. That is why he invited Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to his oath-taking ceremony. And then he came to Lahore, ignoring the advice of his advisors and associates that it would be bad for his political prospects. So, but he took the risk. He came to Lahore, and some of Pakistani politicians like Bilawal, they shouted the slogan that anybody who is friendly to Narendra Modi is a traitor. Modi ka jo yaar hai, gaddar hai, gaddar hai. You must have heard that slogan.
Yeah.
So how do you look at that?
So I think this. So I'm going to not personalize this to Modi, although it obviously applies to Modi. Whenever the Indian Prime Minister has gone to India or has appeared with the Pakistani Prime Minister, within a week or two, there is a sanguinary terrorist attack in India. So I'm one of those scholars that take a very dim view on having high-level discussions with the Pakistanis, because they don't pay off and they almost inevitably result in a terrorist attack. Now, so what does this mean for Indian leadership? What is it supposed to do? I'm a fan of masterly activity.
What activity? Sorry?
Masterly inactivity. It's the policy of the British towards Afghanistan at different points in time. Masterly inactivity. You don't ignore it, but you're not going out of your way to to be proactive in trying to change the state. You basically strategically ignore it.
Okay. I seem to recall one Pakistani Major General. His name was Ijaz Awan. He is a former ambassador. in 2020, I think he said on Pakistani television that I don't understand Pakistani government's policy on the Kashmir issue. Imran was the prime minister at the time. So if a major general does not understand Pakistan's foreign policy on Kashmir, so how would an ordinary person know that? So what do you think is Pakistan's Kashmir policy? What is the minimum that Pakistan wants?
Okay, so what I will say is that these generals only say this when they retire. They don't say this when they're serving. They say this when they retire. You'll find a handful of generals who get very reasonable once they're no longer in uniform. And I'm glad that we have those people, but those people don't represent the policy. So in my view, what the Pakistan Army wants, it knows it can't take Kashmir by force. So it wants to make it increasingly expensive for the Indians to hang on to it. And that's what it's been doing through the support of cross-border terrorism. It's just making it difficult for the Indians to keep hanging on to Kashmir. And the Indians will keep hanging on to Kashmir. Make no mistake, there's no future in which the Indians say, okay, Pakistan, hum har gaya. There's no future in which that happens. So my view is that Pakistan wants to just keep hanging on to Kashmir, increasingly expensive. And in many ways, the Modi government serves the Pakistan military really quite well, especially as Modi, after 2019 in particular, has embraced increasingly a communal agenda. It reaffirms to many Pakistani generals' belief this two-nation theory nonsense. So every single day, there's a living confirmation of the salubriousness of the two-nation theory. So that's what I think Pakistan wants as a minimum, is to just keep making it hard for India to digest Kashmir. And given the largely free reign that Indian security forces have in Kashmir, and the impunity that generally surrounds their conduct and misconduct, the Pakistani gamble pays off, because the Indian counterinsurgency grid, which is needed to repel the Pakistani threat of terrorism, alienates the Kashmiris. So it's a very inexpensive strategy that pays great dividends.
But in the long term, I don't think it benefits any country. That is the sad truth.
Well, it doesn't benefit any country, but it benefits the army. And people need to make a distinction between the army and the country. It doesn't benefit any country, but it benefits the Pakistan Army.
Thank you very much, ma'am. You really don't mince your words. You say your piece in a very blunt manner. And
sorry.
If any friend has a dissenting perspective, opposing perspective, they are welcome to give their opinion on my channel. So thank you very much. I'm really grateful to you.
No, thank you for having me. This was great fun. Sorry that you picked a topic where we can't be very cheerful or optimistic. Sorry about that.
Yes, that's very sad. Yes.
All right.
Let's hope better sense prevails, and these two countries learn to live as friends.
Inshallah.
Thank you. Thank you again.